Hello, everyone. We're back live on YouTube and LinkedIn, bringing you yet another exciting episode of the Top Innovator Series. This is where we dive into proven leadership ideas, game-changing strategies, and of course, the brilliant minds behind them. My name is Josef Martens, and I'm thrilled to introduce today's guest to you. With us today is Neil Morris. Neil is the head of IT at Redaptive, an energy as a service provider. Before that, he's been CIO with Ball Aerospace and Maxar Technologies, and he held other tech executive roles with ADT, Tata Communications, and other companies. And today, we're thrilled to have him with us. Neil, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here in this conversation.
No, thank you for having me. Was excited to join and just have a chat.
Yeah. So let's talk leadership, right? It's a conversation about your journey. You're super successful, great career. When you reflect on that, what do you think are some of the secret ingredients to that success?
I don't know if there's really any secrets to the success. I think I look back at my career, and I've always been a bit of a leader. Actually, ended up in a leadership role very early on in my career. In high school, I took a job at a local Taco Bell, right? And I actually ended up there for uh, just about 6 years. I graduated from high school, became a shift manager, then an assistant manager, then a general manager, and ended up running the store. And it was actually a fairly um, painful experiment in leadership,
Okay.
right? Because at the time, uh, I really wasn't ready for it, right? And I was, you know, it turned me off to management for a long time. And I went into my technical career as an individual contributor. And when I kind of look back at it and what made it yet a failure for me, um, although there was some really good learning, it was really that early in my career, I was thinking about leadership and focusing on being liked, being supportive of my employees, right? You had friendships with them, and I really had my eye internally, right, to the organization, right, both the organization and the relationships. And when I came back around and started in leadership, in technical roles at ADT, then Maxar and Ball and
Hmm.
so forth, what I really learned was, you know, leadership is more about keeping the eye on the customers, on what we were trying to achieve,
Hmm.
on the mission of the organization, right? On those things that um, drive the business forward, right? And when we really focus not on am I liked in the organization? How are the people in the organization going to respond to this decision, right? Or and
Hmm.
how am I going to do internal change management? All those are important,
Yep.
right? But when you start with the focus on, is this the right thing for our customers? Whether that
Yep.
be the end customer of the company or your customer as an IT organization, and are we as an organization doing what's best for them? It really keeps you laser focused. And for me, uh, someone that has a habit of really liking to be liked, right,
Yep.
makes me focus on really what's important. And am I making a decision based on my peer relationships or the relationships with my employees, right? Or am I making decisions that are right for the company, which is really just a different way of saying decisions that are right for our customers. Um, so just, you know, I would say the key to success is really that focus on why you're in business, how you're delivering for your customers, how you're internal or external, and then having all your decisions kind of pivot around that. Because early in my career, that was not how I thought,
Right.
um, and it really actually turned me off to leadership for quite a while.
Interesting. What caused that change of perspective? Because that's an enormous change, right? Shifting from the internal focus, shifting from being liked or doing things that are pleasant for the employees, maybe over to what's in the interest of the business. What caused that change?
I think that change came fairly slowly over 10 to 15 years
Okay.
of still being a leader in my organizations, right? I took roles in architecture and I was making technical decisions, and I found people still kind of followed me, right? But without the burden of the management word, right? I was able to take a different path. I also found a number of really good, mentors, right? That were able to I was able to observe lead and have conversations about why different decisions were made, and started to see people that really modeled that behavior of being incredibly, customer driven and customer focused, and asking the questions of, how is this going to be received by the market, by our customers,
Hmm.
right? Are we doing the right things, and is everyone, pulling the rope in the same direction?
Mm-hmm.
So it was really just time, right? I think when I became a manager, a leader, a store manager, like at
Yeah.
basically 20 years old, managing a restaurant of 50, basically, young adults, right? High school jobs, just after, very few people that would see it as a career. Um, I wasn't trained or didn't have, those modeled behaviors to kind of look at. So just a matter of getting into to some really good organizations. When I was at, one of my first jobs was University of Phoenix, and I think of a handful of mentors that I had then, most of which from that role I don't have communication with much any longer, because it's been, several decades
Right.
ago. But more recently in my career, I can think of people that have, really helped me model that behavior. So I think it's just one of those things that you learn in the trenches and through modeled behavior of, like, why did that work, and realizing that it was the focus on
Hmm.
the customer and delivering
Mm-hmm.
value. And then how do we get the organization to really rally behind
Yep.
that, right? And it gives you the opportunity then to call someone out, like, hey, that's not being excellent,
Yep.
right? That is not delivering
Yep.
excellent value to our customer, right? And when you can frame those more challenging conversations in that way, of that behavior, that choice, that, you know thing that
Mm-hmm.
you're struggling with, that's not excellence, because it's not providing excellence to our customers. um, it disarms the conversation,
Yep.
right? And earlier in my career, having that conversation of, this isn't the right thing to do,
Mm-hmm.
without the context of, this isn't the right thing for our customers, right, feels a little bit more like a personal judgment. And really, in leadership, it's not, a personal judgment. It's,
Mm-hmm.
are we doing the right things?
Mm-hmm.
And just the tools and techniques to reframe the conversation in
Yep.
that way, um, were learned over decades.
I
Maybe I'm
like
just a
that.
little bit of a slow learner.
I like the connection that you make there between focus on the customer as a leadership philosophy, if you want, and at the same time as a tool for communication, to
Yeah,
structure the communication around that. That makes a lot
yeah.
of sense. Mm.
And I know a lot of people that are a lot more comfortable being very direct, to
Mm-hmm.
the point of maybe almost coming off at rude at times.
Mm.
And I struggle with that, from my personality. But if I can reframe it as, that's not being excellent, because we're not going to get where we
Yeah.
need to be for our customers, that is a much more comfortable talk track for me,
Yeah.
and keeps us mission focused on what we're trying to deliver.
Yep. Yep. And probably lands better on whoever needs to hear the message. Mm.
Absolutely.
You started talking about people that you looked to learn about your leadership and picking up lessons from them. Talk to me more about that. What were some messages that you got from trusted advisors or role models or people you looked up to? What did they tell you? What was some advice they gave you that you thought was really meaningful?
So I can think of a couple different examples. I think of, and I'll, call him out a little bit. Jeff Robertson, who was the COO of Maxar Technologies until
Hmm.
recently. I had followed him from ADT Security, there, and he gave me a talk track that I've heard other places, but really helped reinforce it, of, like, be a little bit uncomfortable, right? Have a
Hmm.
foot on really solid ground, right? You don't want to get so far, I'll say, out over your skis, right, that you're setting yourself up for failure, right? But don't be stuck in just what you know, right? Be willing to stretch, be willing to take on an opportunity that's just a little bit out of your comfort zone, where you get that a little bit
Yeah.
of anxiety, right? Because that's really where you can grow. right? As a leader, as a technologist, as an organization, right? If you're doing the same thing you've always done,
Yeah.
right, you're always going to kind of get the same results, um, but only to a point, right? The market's going to evolve around you,
Mm-hmm.
and you're going to end up being left behind. So always stay a little bit uncomfortable and leverage that kind of fear, that anxiety, like that stress reflex, right, as a motivating factor,
Yep.
right? And use that to grow and to continue to drive both in your career, but your organization and all the people
Yeah.
around you. You want to set everyone up to be successful, right? But success isn't standing still, right? And to motivate and move an organization, you have to, you know, demonstrate and show a willingness to be vulnerable, step
Mm-hmm.
into a position maybe you're not completely sure you're ready for, right? Maybe that, you know, making decisions that aren't perfectly clear, but that kind of bias for action.
Yep. Yep.
That's
Makes
one
perfect
that's
sense.
really,
Mm-hmm.
really resonated with me
Yep.
over the years.
Yep.
Um, the other is, you know, thinking of, Tammy Hyland, who was, the CIO before I was at Maxar, and we worked together for, 10 or 15 years as well. And she was just a, fabulous leader. Came from a little bit more of a technical background when I met her. She had already moved into more leadership roles, right? But just her way of managing people, framing conversations, and using questions, right, to get people all aligned, right? I heard this. Is this really what you meant, right? Or am I understanding this in the right way, right? Really helps generate, buy-in, make sure people understand. Because earlier in my career, a lot of things that I learned. One of the things was uh, a lot of people, including a lot of leaders and some managers I've seen, they take what they hear and they think they understand, and they make decisions on it, when really communication is not always that clear, right? And just
Mm-hmm.
that reinforcing, do
Mm-hmm.
I really understand what you're trying to get at? Do I really understand what you think the results are? Do I really understand the intent behind your words? And taking a lot of time to listen and question. And I think of that kind of, coaching method of leadership.
Yep.
Like, how do I get people to understand their own consequences of those choices? How does this align to where we're trying to get? Drive customer value, drive value into the organization. Do you really think that results are going to be achieved by making that decision? And then being okay with some silence to allow people to think and work through those by themselves, is another technique that I've, learned, from her, and through the years, that has really helped me out.
Yeah.
So those are two in particular that I find myself going back to very often: is question and be okay with silence, lead people to kind of the results of their thinking, um, not making assumptions, and being okay with a little of, anxiety of trying something a little bit new, which kind of goes on with just continuously learning.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always reading, always learning, always
Yep.
talking to people, um, which probably goes to a little bit of just, try to be humble as well.
Yep. I like that recipe. The way you described it around coaching of asking just one question, right? Temptation is always to follow up with 7 other questions that just muddle the whole thing. And then let silence do the heavy lifting. Because silence can be difficult and there's a lot accomplished with it.
It is, right? And I think I've heard that from some of our sellers too, right? It's just like, at some
Mm,
point, just stop selling,
yeah.
right? let
Indeed.
let it be there. Don't talk yourself out of the deal.
Yeah.
Because silence can be
Yep.
unnerving, and societally, we like to fill the space.
It's not something, it's a little bit uncomfortable, right? It fits together with what you said before there. Now, we
Yeah.
talked about the past. Neil, let's take a look at where you are today in your leadership journey. Not a question about roles, positions, or companies, but what's a focus area for you at the moment? What's an area where you think this is an area where I can level up, I can grow there. This is something that I want to pay attention to.
Yeah. So Throughout my career, most of the roles that I've been in, both as an individual contributor and leading organizations, have been very exciting because there's a lot of change, there's a lot of
Hmm.
innovation, there's a lot of driving. And when I think about it and I think about what drives me, I think of myself as a builder, right? And as a builder, really focusing on you know learning what's new and how to apply it. So right now in technology, you got all the AI and all these kind of things, right? And certainly I'm looking to learn and how do we make sure that we're making appropriate investments for the
Hmm.
organization, like skilling people up and all those kind of items. And that is honestly very comfortable for me, right? I'm used to learning and driving change. I think of early web and voice over IP and like even MPLS and just all these different things that you know, technologists have had to adapt to, and I've had to lead technology teams through. And AI is another one of those, maybe a little bit more volumetric, coming a little quicker, right? There's some nuance to it, but I'm very
Hmm.
comfortable there. What I haven't been in my career um, is an operator, right? And I've worked with large
Okay.
organizations where I've hired people that can really help manage KPIs, uptime, right? That very detailed work of making sure you're I say polishing rocks, right? Really
Hmm.
taking a rough stone and making something kind of beautiful out of it. It's not an area where I've had the opportunity to focus a lot in my career. So I am spending a lot of time kind of learning, working for a little bit of a smaller organization, having more of an operationally focused role. It's where I'm a little uncomfortable, right? And where I'm growing and expanding kind of my toolbox, right? Because you're coming in and like, oh, we need to go into a new market. We need to address a new technology. We need to disrupt ourselves before we get disrupted. Like all those kind of items, that's been the 25 years of my experience is like transitioning, digital transformation, right? But just the how do you do really good ITIL, COBIT, like these kind of frameworks from an IT organization
Okay.
to how do you do change management, configuration management, incident management. I mean, it is needed. It is value added work. It's a little bit laborious for me because it's very organized work. Um, and that's not my natural tendency. So I'm focusing on stretching myself into those
Wow.
areas. Um, to complement that to allow me to work with those people that I'm putting in those operational roles and help guide them better,
Hmm.
right? And help them understand the value in kind of those kind of things. Because I think over the course of my career, I have overlooked those a little bit because I've had the
Hmm.
opportunity to, because I've been working in such
Yep.
high growth
Yep.
organizations, going through such dramatic change that you know, those weren't as much a focus area as they are now of how do we scale an organization,
Yep.
right, from hundreds of millions to billions. That requires very organized structured delivery, and it's always been there in the organizations I've been in, but they've always been larger organizations where I've hired people that was their expertise. And I've always been very good at understanding where my strengths are and playing to my strengths and hiring people that I say we irritate each other just enough because I can be the visionary, strategic driver of transformation, and they're like, no, structure, organization, detail, right? So just finding that right amount of friction.
Yep.
Uh,
Yep.
and in this organization, I'm kind of having to play both sides of
Okay.
that role. So I'm very much focused on how do I put more structure into my
Wow.
unstructured brain.
Okay. That sounds like the tension has moved inwards now. The tension that was outside before is now happening in your
Well,
mind. I
it
hope
is a
it's not
little
leading
bit.
to schizophrenia where two of you are talking to each other and fighting it
I
out in
have
the head.
lots of conversations with myself.
I
It's like,
imagine. I imagine. Let me ask you one last question, Neil, and then we're going to land the plane. If you had a magic wand and you could make a change about how most tech people lead, what would that be? And I know we're generalizing now. I know this is not applying to everyone, but just looking at your peers, looking at what other folks are doing, if you could enact one difference, what would that be?
This might not answer that question directly, right? But when I think of technologists and I think about technical leaders, I came from a technical background, right? And I was a manager and leading people early in Taco Bell, and went away from it because it gave me a bad experience, and came back to it, and got a degree in business management and then information systems management
Mm-hmm.
and those kind of things. Um, I see a lot of people moving up out of technology roles into leadership roles. And generally that's because they were already leading a lot of technical
Mm-hmm.
decisions,
Mm-hmm.
but part of that leadership becomes management, right? And I see technologists moving into leadership and specifically management roles at various levels in organizations, um, that still act like technologists, right? And
Mm.
they still very much want to be hands-on, right? And I enjoy sitting down with some of our technologists, and at this point in my career feeling very underwhelmed with my technical capabilities because they're all several generations ago, but I enjoy working with the technology. But if you're not careful as a
Yeah.
technical leader, as a technologist and a manager, and you focus too much on the technology, you're not focusing on the customers, on the value you're actually delivering. You're looking at the technology right in front of you. When you're not looking at the customers and where your value to the organization is, then you're also not bringing your people along, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're having very good conversations on how to build a system, but it comes off a little rudderless, right? So when
Mm.
you go into those roles, right? What I would tell people aspiring to go into management and leadership roles as technologists, or people just stepping into leadership roles in general, if you don't have a background in management and leadership, it's a completely different skill set than being a technologist, right? And it's a hard pivot, right? And don't underestimate the time and effort it
Yeah.
takes to learn how to
Yeah.
lead well,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
That would be kind of my advice, right, to my peers and colleagues, or those especially just coming into leadership roles,
Yep.
is it is a different skill set.
Yep.
Spend the time, study it, find a mentor that's not a technologist but a leader, right? And they don't even necessarily have to be in a
Yep.
technical
Yep.
role. That could be in HR or finance or others.
Yeah, I really appreciate how you phrased it. To take the time to lead well. That's rarely said that way, right? We talk about leadership as if implicitly it's a positive thing, but to lead well is a distinction that's important. I get that. Neil, thank you so much for being in the conversation here. It's been an absolute pleasure. Many things I will remember. The one thing that's definitely going to stick with me is that combination of the leadership philosophy and the communication tool of putting the customer first or focusing on the customer and the business. That was fantastic. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Neil.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
To everyone else out there, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, and most importantly, come again for the next episode of the Top Innovator Series. And until then, keep your brain cells active.